A new Netflix original film that hit the streaming service this past Thursday night. This comes from writer-director Zack Snyder, who re-teams up with Netflix for the second time after Army of the Dead. This movie takes place in a new futuristic world, very similar to Star Wars. This movie was a pitch by Zack Snyder to Lucasfilm almost 10 years ago, now come to life. This film stars Sophia Boutella as someone who's trying to help a farming village be avoided by the terror of the overarching villain group of the movie. That person is led by Ed Skrein, who's trying to at least have these farmers harvest food for the rival military group. So instead, Butella tries to lead a group of people to combat the force of the villains and to and to fight against the villains. Now, this time around, she teams up with a lot of people. She teams up with Jaimin Hunster, who plays a former general, Ray Fisher, Charlie Hunnam, and among others. The film is 2 hours and 13 minutes and is PG-13. Look back to a brand new movie review here on Max Talks Movies. My name is Max Dinenberg. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe, ring the bell. We're about to hit 175 now. Quickly, so happy with all the success that the channel has been getting. Let's get to 200 as quickly as possible. So please subscribe, ring the bell. I do movie reviews, TV show reviews, a box office show every Monday, and other movie rankings. So please subscribe, ring the bell. If you're new to the channel, comment down below. What are your thoughts on Rebel Moon? Are you skipping this film, waiting for the director's cut? Are you waiting to binge part 1 and part 2 together? Let me know in the comment section down below. Also, please like the video, the thumbs up button. So this is actually, sorry, as I didn't say, this is Rebel Moon part 1, A Child of Fire. And part 2 will be releasing in April on Netflix. They shot both movies back to back. And another big thing I do is, as I mentioned earlier, should chat about in the comment section. 6 months ago, Zack Snyder has been promoting this film by also saying that there's also a director's cut that is rated R, and it feels like a completely different movie. Snyder has now revealed in interviews that when when he was doing this movie for Netflix, Netflix obligated that they would give him money to make whatever movie that they wanted him to make, but they also wanted for themselves a PG-13 mainstream movie to release first. So they're kind of like manufacturing their own Snyder cut here by willingly giving Snyder money to make his own movie, but they also want a mainstream movie, which is what this is: 2 hours, 13 minutes, and a PG-13 version. So that being said, this is my thoughts on this movie. I'm just evaluating the movie on these merits. So let's get into Rebel Moon Part 1, A Child of Fire. And the thing that I want to say, based on this movie, now I could feel completely differently and love the director's cut and be entranced by this universe. But for me, this just was not it. I was definitely disappointed in watching this movie. Now, obviously the reception of the critics did not really swarm me off this movie because it has felt like critics have not been the biggest fan of Zack Snyder, and I do like Zack Snyder, so I didn't really take what the critics said to be was going to dictate what I was going to think about this movie. But after seeing it, it just wasn't for me. Now, I'd say that this movie, once again, very similar to a lot of other Zack Snyder films, is very well cast. Sophia Boutella is an extremely strong lead in this movie. She's kind of the only one who has a real character really going on in this entire movie. She has a past that connects herself to the villains of the film. Um, and she does command the screen, and she's a total badass. And I'm excited both in the director's cut and in the sequel to see more what Sophia Boutella can continue to do. She really commits herself in the hand-to-hand combat in the film, and I found her to be a really intriguing lead in the film. And she's kind of the only character that I was kind of interested in. I think also Ed Skrein does an excellent job as the villain of the movie. He's definitely a bit over the top, but I think this movie kind of needed that into this movie. And I thought Ed Skrein did a very solid job in the film. The rest of the cast does all around just an okay, solid job. A lot of the other cast, other than those two, are very much teases for what they're going to be in part 2. And that is my biggest problem with Rebel Moon Part 1, is that it feels like a feature-length teaser trailer for something that we actually want to see happen in part 2. And I don't always say that about part 1s, that they feel like teaser trailers, but this movie the whole second act of this movie is these two characters, who are led by Sophia Boutella. Uh, these two characters who are going off to recruit people, very similar to A Bug's Life. This movie is very much for Star Wars fans. I think this movie is clearly, again, as I said, Snyder pitched the movie to Lucasfilm almost 10 years ago, and this is his version of Star Wars. But the movie also takes from like Magnificent Seven, A Bug's Life, Avatar. There are a lot of different plot lines and stuff that are directly taken from things. And the reason why I say A Bug's Life is because we have a farm, and we have villains who are saying we're going to come back in a couple weeks when you have the supply for us. And at the same time, our hero says, I'm going to go out and find recruits so they can come back and defend us. That's definitely exactly what A Bug's Life is. And you see some Star Wars things. There's literally a directly Mos Eisley scene where our two characters go to this bar, which is very similar to Mos Eisley, and they have to find their kind of Han Solo, which turns out to be kind of Charlie Hunnam in this film. So there's kind of like direct takes from these movies, which I wasn't a huge fan of because it just felt like rip-offs more than actual homages to those prior films. But as I said, this movie has a whole 60% of this movie is kind of the second act of this movie, which is our two characters going to recruit people to come back to the village to fight for the farmers. But we recruit all these people. That includes Charlie Hunnam and Djimon Hounsou and Ray Fisher. And we get some cool, we drop into some cool action scenes, but this becomes the most repetitive movie of the year, where we go to a planet, we catch our hero in the middle of an action scene, and they just join the party. And we feel like that these characters will be major factors in the third act action scene because we see all of their different talents. One can tame animals, one was a general, one is a scoundrel assassin. So they each have their own talents, but they don't get shown in the third act of the movie. They're very much in the background. And I feel like we're just wasting time recruiting people because they're not really doing anything in this movie. But the part from a structural perspective is that the majority of the movie is us taking the time to recruit people. And we don't get any satisfaction, conclusion, or at least build up to what those characters are going to be until part two. And that's why I find this movie to be very frustrating because there's good things on the table, good actors who just feel like are here to be like, hey, we're in this movie, we'll see you in part two. And instead of having a satisfying ending, because this movie sets up a plot line with Ed Skrein's character that could have been a good, satisfying conclusion to part one, but also still sets things up in motion for part two. But this movie ends, and it just ends in such a weird place. And I am getting tired these days of movies having to split between part one and part twos. But this movie really suffers more than most part ones I've seen so far this year, where it sets up so much of the characters to be like, actually, we're not going to have these characters do any of the things that we set up in the third act of the movie. We're going to save what we set up in the first 2 hours of this film for another movie. And it just feels like wasted time here. It makes it very frustrating. Again, Zack Snyder's movie is gorgeous to look at. It has a lot of the Zack Snyder isms, the slow-mo, the things like that. It does feel like this movie could have been rated R, and knowing that there's a director's cut coming out that will be rated R, I'm excited. And he says it's not just about extended scenes, it's a completely different movie. So I am excited to see what Zack Snyder's director's cut is, and I'll watch it to see if it anywhere helps. But the version that I watched this past Thursday night was not for me. Not a terrible movie. It's very well directed, well acted, but I think the story is really confounding from a structural perspective. There's so much exposition that has to be given to this movie. It just feels like a 2 hour teaser instead of its own movie. So overall, Rebel Moon Part 1, A Child of Fire, I'm going to give a 2 out of 5, 5 stars. I'm going to go 40%, 40% for Rebel Moon Part 1. What are your thoughts on the movie? Let me know in the comment section down below, and I'll see you guys soon.